members, and I'll open this
Depends on your point of view.
this meeting of the Planning Committee today, Tuesday, 2nd of May, here at Auckland Council. If you could please take your seats. Welcome to the councillors, Independent Māori Statutory Board Member Tohenari. Welcome to the public, our staff, media who might be here. Sitting beside me is Dean Kimpton, Chief Operating Officer. No Jim today. Jim's doing something else.
What are you doing with Jim? I tried my best.
Members, we've got some restrictions on the presentations today. We've got staff only available at certain times, so we're just going to have to time our way through the agenda. Particularly item 12 will have to be considered at sometime around about noon due to the unavailability of staff prior to that time, but I'm sure we'll work things through. I'll take apologies first, and I have apologies from Councillor Kathy Casey for absence, Councillor Al Filipina for absence, the Mayor Phil Goff for absence on council business, Councillor Sayers and Councillor Walker and Councillor Denise Lee. They are all for absence. Sorry, who's the one for early departure?
Councillor Walker's here.
Sorry, it's Councillor Wayne Walker for early departure.
He hasn't arrived yet, Mr. Chairman. How can he be departing early?
Well, he's already gone.
And
there's no apologies
Councillor
for lateness.
Hulse. You've got Councillor Hulse for lateness on council business. So I'll move those. Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Contrary no. Declare those carried. Members, are there any declarations to make at this stage on any item on the agenda before us? There being none, I will move past that. Welcome, Member Namani. Petitions, there are none, so we'll go straight to public input today. Oh, confirmation of minutes. I've missed that one, so I'll confirm the minutes, move confirmation of the minutes from the 28th. And I have a second in Councillor Linda Cooper. Thank you. All those in favour say aye. Contrary no. Declare that carried. And now we'll move to public input. And I've had two requests for public input. I've accepted one, and that's from Mr. Matt Lowry from Greater Auckland on the congestion-free network Mark II. Come on up, Matt. And I think, is there anybody else with you, Matt? Or you? Just me. Okay. And also, just before Matt starts, I've recommended one request, and that was from Leroy Beckett from Generation Zero to speak on the importance and support for the linear park. That's the Victoria Street Linear Park. I've recommended to Leroy that he comes forward when that item is considered on the agenda, and we're thinking that's not too far away. And therefore he can be speaking to the business that's on our agenda, not in the absence of business on the agenda. So that's been taken up by Leroy Beckett, and he'll come at that time. And right now we've got Matt Lowry, and Matt, you've got a presentation, Greater Auckland's congestion-free network. In your hands.
Thank you, Chair. So thank you for having us. We are Greater Auckland, formerly you may know us as Transport Blog. So all of us are here in this room because we want Auckland to be greater. We believe in Auckland and the potential for it to grow and become a much better city. So Auckland is becoming increasingly more diverse. We're becoming younger, we're more educated, and we're growing at a much faster rate than everyone else. And so it's important to remember that there's no going back to the Auckland of old. We must move forward. And the good thing is we've been doing a lot of really good stuff. We are improving particularly our transport system and public transport over the last decade or so, and we're seeing significant improvements and benefits as a result of that. I'm going to skip through some of these slides just in the interest of time, but I think the important point to remember is that we shouldn't underestimate the potential for Aucklanders to use public transport. We're showing time and time again, and particularly cycling as well, if we build it, people will use it, and people do want to use it. And so we've come a long way, but there's also a lot of challenges. Auckland is situated on a narrow isthmus, which we know is partly what draws us to this place and what makes it an interesting place, but at the same time it creates its own challenges. 4 years ago we presented our congestion-free network, our original one, to the council, and we're really pleased with how that's gone. We see a lot of it has been adopted within various plans, and going forward we see that continuing. But there's also been other developments too, such as ATAP. And our ATAP has been a really useful information, but it's not everything. It's not bold enough, it's not fast enough, and it doesn't really transform Auckland as fast as it should do. One of the reasons for that is that it looks at public transport only as an option of last resort. It looks at it as what can we do only if it solves congestion rather than whether it's useful in its own right. We think that there's opportunity there to improve and build upon that, be more aspirational, particularly as we're coming into the refreshed Auckland plan and other plans like that. So we decided it was time to rethink our congestion-free network, take into account the changes that have occurred over the last 4 years, to update it with all that information. We want to make sure that it has good connections across the entire city for all Aucklanders. We want to make sure that it's also affordable and it's something that's practical we could build within a realistic time frame. It's no use having a plan that's unaffordable that no one can ever build. So to start off with, we've got a series of rail networks. Now we've got the existing rail network, which will be enhanced obviously with the City Rail Link and further improvements, and we want to maximise that out to ensure that we're getting a really true metro system through there. But that alone is not going to be enough. All the reports are indicating that we need a lot more, and there's been a lot of discussion that's occurred around that. We want to build on that. We want to look at how we can get more buses out of the city centre, for example, and take, for example, the recent announcement around the city to the airport and extend it to the North Shore. We see reports that suggest that the busway is going to start facing congestion problems itself within 10 to 20 years, and so we need to think about how we can link that up. We also see the huge amount of growth that's occurring in the northwest, and that's about to occur, and how we need to serve that. So the busway is a good start, and that's obviously in the planning, but we think we need to go further, and we can link that together to create a really true good network with a good connections through the city centre, and obviously over to Takapuna. The blue line you can see there extends all the way to Orewa, and so we want to take that all the way there and serving all that development in the north as well. So that's effectively 4-line rail network that is serving all of Auckland, or most of Auckland, but that's not enough, and we need to do more. We need to make it easier. We don't want everyone having to come through the city, because not everyone's going to come here, but we want to have as good cross-town services too. So we've got more on top of that. Now this is a series of additional to that is busways, bus priority, to create a true high-level network. Now this is only the top of the network. There's obviously a lot more buses and ferries and other things below that, but we want to make sure we've got a good, strong core network that's going to grow, because that's what we're seeing is growing, particularly across Auckland. 50%, more than 50% of all the growth in the last decade on public transport has been on rapid transit. So we've got, for example, busways to the airport, upper harbour there, and some cross-town routes as well. So we think that would provide good connections and good fast connections across the city to do that. So we'll get a view of what the entire presentation is here, of high map is here, covering the entire region, and with good quality, high-level public transport that will serve everyone. Now, of course, the big question is how can we deliver it, and how much does it cost? So we have used the costings that are in ATAP and various other documents to come up with some rough estimates. We appreciate they might not be perfect, but to give an idea, they account around about $14 billion over the next 2 decades, which is about 60% of what we're planning to spend on CapEx over that time. So it's something that is completely feasible. We could build if we reprioritise our spending. It would mean making some tough choices as to what we build and when we build it, but it is entirely feasible. So there's a couple of things that we need to go going forward. We realise that there's a lot of the pressure sits with the government. They are the ones that obviously have the biggest funding pool to use, but there are things that we believe the Auckland Council could do, particularly early on, to help encourage this and get a stronger network. This is particularly embedding that in a refreshed Auckland plan as a core component to really ensure that we've got there. We need to have that strong vision for what we want for Auckland, and we think ATAP doesn't go far enough, as I said before, to do that. So that's a very brief overview. We're happy to talk about more about this if you wish, and answer any questions. So thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Members, questions of Matt, Councillor Newman?
Thank you, Matt. I think that was quite an interesting presentation. Do you have more information about the reprioritisation and what you're looking to delay or cancel in order to unlock funding to bring other items forward?
Yeah, I think there's a number of projects that we could look at moving. We can give you some more detail if you like separately, without going through it, rattling off a list here. But it would require changing some, obviously changing some projects, what we build. We think that there's a lot of opportunity to, particularly some of the NZTA projects, if we look as a more complete Auckland package rather than the council versus the government building program. So we think there needs to be more discussion around that aspect and reprioritising all transport spending, not just council spending and programs.
Can through you, Mr. Chair, can you in slower time furnish some more information about the reprioritisation, because I think that's a perfectly reasonable discussion.
Yep. So for example, projects like the East-West Link, that's currently up to $1.8 billion. We think that could be used better by some lower cost improvements to the area. We absolutely agree there needs to be improvements, but not necessarily to that extensive cost. And we could reprioritise some of that funding. Other projects such as Mill Road and other areas like that where development isn't occurring just yet, we can focus on getting these projects in place.
Thank you, Councillor Newman. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Matt, thank you for your presentation. Anyone who's got ideas on a congested free Auckland is definitely worth listening to, because it's congested now. So my question to you is, what are you doing? There's two players in this game, from my thinking: central government and local government. Local government being both potentially members of this council in their direction to Auckland Transport, and Auckland Transport as a CCO. So my question to you is, what are you doing to talk to, one, the Auckland-based central government MPs and the Minister of Transport, and two, what are you doing about talking directly with Auckland Transport? Because this council has already updated its letter of expectation to Auckland Transport, and one of the things in there is just explain how you're going to deliver a work program that makes a congested free Auckland. So those two lobby groups, I think, are important. Yeah,
so we have talked to Auckland Transport already at some levels, and obviously we would love to have some more dialogue with them as well, and we will keep encouraging that. We have also reached out to members of Parliament from all parties to discuss this, and we will obviously continue to do so to encourage that. And obviously, particularly this year is going to be obviously interesting with what's going on with the election, but we will definitely be reaching out to everyone. I think the important point also to think about is that we're always going to have congestion at some point. We can't ever completely remove it, and it's not feasible to do so. But what we need to do is we need to make sure we're giving people options as to how they get around, and that's, I think, the key. What we're trying to say is, if we get these options to move around, we can then have more discussions around things like road pricing and other options that are out there.
And just a small supplementary, if I may. So you don't need any help from us with regards to discussions with Auckland Transport?
We would obviously, we would love, for example, for the council to put this in the refreshed Auckland plan as a key component that we want to see for Auckland. And obviously,
you didn't say that in your presentation.
Yeah, I did.
I did. Sorry.
Yeah, that was one of the next steps that we've got, is that we would like to see that embedded in the refreshed plan, so that it does become a document that Auckland Transport have to look at.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Yes, Matt, thanks very much. I've actually got your vision stuck to my office wall, because I think it's got some very good points to it. Some others I disagree with strongly. So I'd be very interested, like Councillor Newman, seeing the more detail. But saying that ATAP was not aspirational, if I quite agree with you there, because it was based on the middle, and we're now, population was now well above high. So with your analysis, what level of expansion does ATAP need of quantity and quality, but also time frame to bring things further forward to meet that new population trend?
I think the key thing that we're trying to say here is that let's prioritise something that gives people options as to how they get around. And so, ATAP, as I said, it took the stance of only look at public transport where it solves congestion, rather than actually what can we do to improve mobility for Aucklanders. And that's where I think the key that we need to think about and change the perception. So, the funding levels are there here, are there in terms of what ATAP suggests. But what we're saying is, let's change the priority of some of that. Let's bring some of these things forward and push some other things back to make sure that we've actually got this in place sooner, so that we can actually get some benefits from it.
Feedback is the way to go, isn't it?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Look to have a one-on-one chat with you,
Yeah,
Matt,
absolutely.
sometime very worthwhile, please.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you. Thanks, Matt, for the presentation. I'm interested in what you feel the council's role could be in trying to create a better platform for a cross-party Auckland caucus. It has disturbed me that we've regressed in that way. If I look back a few years ago, there was a cross-party Auckland caucus where members of Parliament, irrespective of what their politics were, would come together on certain projects. Do you see Auckland Council as being a player in terms of setting the framework for that?
I think that would probably be very useful. I think there is a lot of discussion that occurs. We've talked to parties, members of Parliament from both parties, and a lot of them get this. I think it's important to how we can bring that together and actually form a consensus, I guess. And so yes, I think that would be useful for the council to engage
play a
in
role
that.
in
Yeah.
facilitating those. Because I think, from my own experience, when you actually have everyone in the same room at the same time, receiving the same material, it's irresistible in terms of trying to get a consensus. It's just that much.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
So you would see council, if it's acting responsibly, it would actually arrange those sort of briefings moving forward.
I don't see why the council couldn't do. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. Thanks, Matt. It's good to hear that you're actually looking at this, not just on how to get around or what we need, but actually how we're going to get people to where they actually need to go. And I mean, as you may know, in West Auckland and the North West, we've got the least jobs and the worst public transport. So do you think that those measures that you've proposed on that side of the region will actually address that, because we have more people having to move out of where they live to get jobs?
Absolutely. The rail line out to the west is fantastic, and I've used it this morning, for example. But it obviously doesn't serve that northwest area. So it's about giving people those options, and that would particularly with the huge growth that's occurring in the northwest would help serve that and serve it to where people are going, which is primarily towards the city centre or to the North Shore. And so that would definitely help.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Hills.
Once again, thanks, Matt, and thanks to the team. You guys have really sort of changed the conversations over the last few years, so it's been really exciting to see. I think obviously the next steps are pretty clear in there, but it is around changing the conversation. So when we talk congestion, I look at it more as your choice to jump on something that is congestion free. It might not mean your car is moving any freer. So I think it needs to be more around the movement of people somehow, because I think people still think in a different way. The other thing is that the discussion keeps coming up, especially on online forums and things, around the sort of heavy rail versus light rail kind of discussion. But do you want to maybe flesh out, in a simple way, why it needs to be sort of both, and what the point is you guys are going for here?
Yeah, I think the key thing there is that everything is on a spectrum. So yes, you could have dinky trams that are stuck in traffic on the road, or you can have there are many modern cities with modern urban rail systems that run on the street that have almost the same capacity as what the City Rail Link will have. And that, the key there is the implementation and how well Auckland Transport implement what they're proposing. So if they do it as I've suggested, absolutely it will have significant capacity and frequency and speed. But if it gets compromised by not wanting to remove for example, parking or other issues. So it's absolutely possible that we could have a very high quality system. It's just how we implement it is the key thing, rather than necessarily the focus on the mode.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wayne Walker.
Sure. Refreshing to hear your comments around obviously applying different priorities. As far as Auckland Transport's concerned, they've got this funnel, this screen that they use to evaluate projects. Does that need to be re-looked at in terms of mobility?
I would say yes. I think the issue of mobility is something that we don't discuss enough. We're talking about, as Councillor Hills was saying, we talk about congestion rather than necessarily how we get around. And it's easy to do that when you're stuck in a car and you're not moving very fast, and you're always wanting more capacity or more lanes, but that's not necessarily the best way of doing it. So yes, a more focus on mobility would be useful.
So if that process needs to be reworked, how do we go about doing that?
I think that's important for the council to push through as part of the Auckland plan as to what we want for our goals for the city, because those goals should then filter down through Auckland Transport as to how they're prioritising projects. So it's key to get those goals there, and also in the long-term plan as well, as to how those goals filter through to Auckland Transport.
So I just put that to you, Mr. Chair, that is something that we need to identify.
And I think if you look at the recommendation, which I'll move shortly after questions, I think that will pick it up and we'll examine it there. Good point. Councillor Watson.
Thanks, Matt. Great presentation. And
the calculator.
Thank you for including Whangaparāoa in the network. We often don't make the cut, so that's nice to see. That network looks fantastic, and it's going out a couple of decades. In amongst all your other work, and I'm thinking particularly of the immediate future now, do you have any view on kind of interim solutions, given what we know is here now and coming even more so in the next few years, in terms of, and I'm thinking particularly in terms of public transport, low-cost improvements that build on success while this network hopefully gets rolled out. And I think of places like, for places where park and ride's a huge success, where ferry services have been a massive success, but which they're constrained and are looking more constrained going into the future. Do you have a view on those that are shorter term?
Yeah, I think the biggest opportunities around that, and some of those have been taken up recently, is particularly around bus priority measures in places. So whether that be a bus lane, or even in cases just to buses being able to jump the intersection, so it's often just a short lane can do well to improve that. So thinking particularly towards the airport on State Highway 20B, I think there's some opportunities there that I know Auckland Transport and NZTA are looking at. We need to make sure those are done quickly to provide good quality options. The same thing I think in the northwest, and with the northwestern busway, we need to get some services there. We need to get some priority there at least, so that buses aren't constantly stuck in traffic, and that will help both build patronage and usefulness of that network.
So, sorry, just follow up. Did your group welcome that sort of more finer detailed
Absolutely.
feedback? Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you, Matt. Matt, we get lots of presentations here, and there was even one carried in the Herald on the weekend about a stadium, some refer to as the Plug.
Aquarium.
And I guess I know that your organisation has got a lot of depth. I wonder if you might like just to explain, not by name, but sort of the roles and the skill that is actually sitting in behind Greater Auckland and its congestion-free network, just to give a sense of confidence to us or otherwise as to how you've arrived at this proposal.
Well, I think the key part is that many of the things that are on this network are what are already in council plans at some form or other. So we've as I mentioned, we launched the original congestion-free network. There are things in there that no one was talking about at the time, and that are now on plans. And I think the key thing is not so much whether we should build what we should build, but when we should build them. And that's, I think, the key message is we can bring them forward. And also, the secondary part to that is how we present it to the public. Council in particular and Auckland Transport have a tendency to draw a line, draw a project line on a map and focus on a project rather than thinking about the network. So what we're trying to do is bring together that experience of talking about how a network can work and how people can actually use it, because that's actually how you engage people, in our view, is to show them how it's going to work and how it can improve their life.
And key to my question is the range of experts that sit behind this work. Can you just give us a sense?
Yeah, so we have a number of people involved with us. That includes planning experts, economists, and others. So we have a range of discussions, particularly focusing on transport, that we can rely on and get information from to help build that.
Okay, and just you mentioned economists. Can you just go back to the slide where you compare the spend quantum between CFN2 and ATAP? Is that available there? It's quite a significant difference. You've done some good analysis of ATAP and your own CFN.
Yep.
Just want to get some confidence around that number.
So what we did is we've looked at the costings that we used in ATAP. So we've pulled out all the various. We've got all the information, pulled out the projects and looked at what was being built. As I said, most of these projects that we're proposing are already in the plan, so that they're already costed at some level to include as part of the ATAP work. And so we've pulled that out, we've grouped that together, and then we've also looked at what ATAP projects we will spend in CapEx over that first 2 decades, and that's what's driven that graph there. So, if some of the figures, they might be wrong, but they're coming from what is already in ATAP and other plans. So we're using that as a base rather than trying to make up our own costs of trying to make assumptions as to what they might be.
And you've got forecasts for the subsequent decade as well?
So what we've just said is, for the first, let's get this built. We need to get this built quickly. So that's, we would like to see it within 10 to 15 to 20 years. That's what would require to spend over that time to do that, and that's what the equivalent cost over that 20-year period is from according to ATAP.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Appreciate it. I'll put up the recommendation. Slight change there, acknowledging Matt rather than Harriet, who was going to present for Greater Auckland. Thank you, Matt. And members, I think it's good for our teams, both at Auckland Transport and our own Transport and Infrastructure Strategy team, to jointly have a look at this work closely and provide feedback to this committee, and I imagine that's probably through Auckland Plan Refresh and other points where we might be considering this. So we'll get that analysis undertaken, and thank you, Matt. Do I have a second?
Yep.
Councillor Hills. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no, and declare that carried. Thank you.